Congress hope that they can get something on the floor of both the House and Senate tomorrow, providing this resolution authorizing the use of force. But there is a question of prerogative, of what is the authority of Congress, what is the authority of the White House. One person involved in these negotiations told me this is not a Democrat versus Republican issue, but this is really a question of the authority between the executive branch of government and the legislative branch. Of course, it is Congress that has the power to declare war. They don't want to cede that power over to the White House. Meanwhile, a couple other things to bring you up to speed on up here on Capitol Hill, Judy. One is that the top members of Congress, the leadership, including the Speaker of the House, the ranking Democrats, and also the Senate leader, Tom Daschle and Trent Lott, have gone to the Pentagon to review the damage firsthand at the Pentagon and to get a briefing on the situation there. And, of course, also Congress working, speeding ahead towards a bill that would give money to aid in these relief efforts. Right now, that number at $20 billion. They're hoping to finalize that. But the $20 billion figure, we are told by people on both sides up here, and you've heard it from the Pentagon, is simply a down payment. They believe that's just a first step, that the actual costs of going through this repair, of rebuilding, of working on steps to ensure this doesn't happen again will be much more than $20 billion. But Congress is working very quickly on that. That may be voted on tonight or tomorrow.
And John, just to be clear, that $20 billion would not include any beefing up of security, any stepping up of our military to take whatever steps the president and military leadership decide to take.
Yeah, that $20 billion is really a question of getting this mess cleaned up, of getting the aid to New York, of getting the money needed to rebuild the Pentagon. But of course, you get to the other questions of security, of beefing up military force. That's a whole nother question. And again, that's why the Pentagon and members up here are saying the $20 billion figure is just the tip of the iceberg. This could end up costing much, much more.
And John, we heard at the White House when one of the reporters, or several of them, asked White House spokesman Ari Fleischer about concern that this additional money might cause the budget, in the budget fight that we've seen, the spending to dip into the so-called Social Security, Medicare trust funds. Ari Fleischer, unflinching in his answer, he said national security is going to come first.
Oh, absolutely, and that is, you would not find Democrats up here, any of the Democratic leaders at least, that would disagree with that. This is, again, either a national emergency or maybe even an act of war that we're looking at here, a time of war. Members of Congress, that whole debate that seemed so big, Judy, just a few days ago about whether or not we dip into the Social Security surplus, that debate pretty much gone. It's been overwhelmed by events.
And Jonathan, again, just to stress that you're not seeing partisan divides over this. I mean, is there any sort of outline, though, Jonathan, to the disagreement you're seeing over the language in that declaration on the use of force?
Well, we have some sound, I think, that we can play so you can hear directly from congressional leaders what they're saying about this. The first one I want to play for you, if we do have it on ready, is from Congressman Dick Gephardt, the top Democrat in the House of Representatives. Here's what he said specifically about that legislation.
That the president has powers in present law to deal with what's in front of us. If the president wants and seeks additional authority or a restatement of present authority that's appropriate, we are quite willing to do that. We want to give him the tools that he needs and his administration needs to deal with this problem.
So there you have from the top Democrat in the House of Representatives saying that he will do whatever necessary to give the president the authority to respond to these acts. But there are concerns, and just shortly after Dick Gephardt came out and said that, we heard in a joint press conference between Trent Lott and Tom Daschle, by the way, a press conference that followed an extraordinary lunch. All 100 members of the United States Senate sat down for lunch together today to talk about these issues, to talk about the money issue and about this resolution authorizing the use of force. The leaders came to the cameras after that and were asked, well, what about concerns that this would give too much authority, a blank check to the president to use military action wherever he sees fit? And Trent Lott said that there were some concerns among members about the division of authority between the White House and the legislative branch of government. And then Tom Daschle had this to say.
The resolution following the Pearl Harbor invasion was a very clear statement of intent with regard to the president's authority and with regard to Congress's intentions. That is exactly our hope, to provide a clear statement of authority.
And actually, Tom Daschle went on to remind everybody that Congress is a co-equal branch of government, and there was concern among members, bipartisan concern, of not ceding that authority, all that authority regarding making war, to the White House. But as you can see, that really this is not a question of partisan disagreements up here, at least not right now, Judy.
All right, Jonathan Karl, the Capitol, and I would just quickly reiterate a moment ago at the White House, Ari Fleischer saying out of 125 military actions undertaken by the United States, he said only 5 of them involve formal declarations of war. Aaron, back to you in New York.
Judy, thank you. We need to sort something out here. We have told you for the last many hours about this dramatic rescue of 5 firefighters who were found in an SUV. They were largely in good shape, we were told. And then a short time ago, we saw some pictures at St. Vincent Hospital in Lower Manhattan of firefighters, obviously, who had been injured and who were being brought to the hospital, and our people on the ground put 2 and 2 together. And in this case, it didn't quite add up. Brian Palmer's down at the scene, and he can unsort this for us. Brian, I gather the guys we saw being brought in were not the 5, correct?
Exactly, Aaron. I just wanted to straighten out exactly who we saw. We've seen a bit of video before. There are actually, that was not the 5 firefighters rescued in the SUV. I repeat, not the 5 firefighters rescued from the SUV buried in rubble after spending 2 days in that vehicle. What we saw was basically a mix of 2 things: regular 911 calls here at St. Vincent's, and also other rescue workers, fire department officials, Port Authority, police, and construction workers who were injured today on site. Aaron?
Brian, thank you. We saw a report a little bit ago, actually, on that people have been getting fragments in their eyes, fiberglass in their eyes, and the like. It's dangerous work down there, and people are getting hurt, and that's what we saw. And we straighten it out as soon as we figure it out. Our new colleague and old friend Lou Dobbs joins us. You've been dealing with the financial markets today. They're going to open on Monday, a little later than they hoped. Is the technology in place to open?
The technology is in place right now, Aaron, to open. The fact is that the physical destruction down there is such, and the building's still in such bad shape, the needs for power and telecommunications, they're still not 100% certain. They're giving themselves, principally Con Edison and Verizon, the telecom that is providing all of the data and voice communication down there, giving themselves an extra 3 days to get it right.
And are they going to use this? I gather they're going to use this time to test out systems and make sure they work.
Absolutely. I mean, you've been reporting on this now for 3 days. The devastation is remarkable. The fact that they could bring these markets back this quickly is nothing less than a superhuman achievement. Dick Grasso, the chairman of the New York Exchange, wanted to bring it back today. I talked with a number of members of the board of the New York Stock Exchange, the people who run the firms. They want desperately to bring this market back. And to put this in some context, the fact that this market has been down, $45 billion a day are traded on the big board. That market alone represents $13 trillion in market capitalization. That is more than London and Tokyo and Frankfurt combined. This is the world's financial center, and it's imperative to bring it back as quickly but as prudently as possible.
Help me with this stuff.
Sure.
The symbolism of the market I get. And I really understand here that symbolically it's enormously important to say that this center of American capitalism, Wall Street, is functioning. We are, as a nation, okay. As a practical economic matter, how much does it matter?
A great deal. It is, much has been talked about symbolically here, but the fact is that that corridor down there, much of it below 14th Street, and much of it has been devastated over the past few days, represents the fuel that keeps a democratic capitalistic society moving. And it touches you through your 401k, all of your investments, those for your children, and for tens and tens of millions of other Americans. In fact, it reaches around the world.
I said, I guess an hour, maybe a little less ago, and perfectly be prepared to get slapped around by you right now for having said it, but that I suspect that not since October of '87 will an opening be watched as closely as this one. We're not in the prediction business, but I guess that it's going to be a nervous at about 9:29 on Monday morning.
Well, as you say, we're not in the prediction business. That doesn't keep any of us from venturing to that area. But the fact is, this is the first time since the Great Depression that we have seen the market close for more than 3 days. It will be watched anxiously, nervously by everyone. But the fact is that the people I'm talking with who run the firms and who run the exchange, they're prepared for an orderly market. We saw it today with the bond market open. We saw a bit of a move up in prices on the bond market. That's because it's a safe haven in times like these. The people who are writing into us are talking about going out and buying cars and not selling a stock for a year. There's a great will in this country. That will is represented politically, economically, and financially in markets like these. So I'm one of those. I'll make a prediction that we're going to see a far more orderly market than anyone imagines.
Is it when the market was shut down early that day a couple of years ago? I forget how many years ago now. There was a real concern that it was really a bad thing, that it kind of pent up both emotions and that the market needs a kind of constant flow to operate in an efficient and orderly way.
Right.
In this case, do you think there might be a salutary effect to the fact the market's been closed, that we've seen world markets trade, we have a sense of what's going on there, people have a much better sense of what's going on in their own country? Sure. Am I wishful thinking here?
No, I think you're making a very good, a very exact point, and demonstrably. We saw the sell-off in Tokyo overnight following the destruction of the World Trade Centers, and we saw the markets come back. We saw the dollar sell off in the day following, and we saw it come back. I think that, as you say, the fact that the market is closed is, first of all, necessary and deeply regrettable. But I think it's also a great thing that we're not going to see the market open tomorrow, in which the market could have been open briefly in 2 days. Next week we'll have a full week for the market to assert itself and to do what it does best, make sense of it all.
Thank you. I know you're back in a little bit to talk more about these things. Thank you.
Good talking with you.
A long time since we've done this. Thank you. Down on, I'm not sure if I mentioned this. You know, you sit here for a while and you forget sometimes what you said and what you haven't. The mayor is hopeful. Mayor Giuliani is hopeful that the city will be able to open up below 14th Street. 14th Street is the line where it's been cut off. Basically, it's virtually impossible to get through there. And the mayor hopes by midnight tonight that will change. Martin Savage down on the ground, not far from there, I suspect, to update us on the situation there. Marty.
Well, the situation continues to be somewhat confused as these buildings that we have talked about. The One Liberty Plaza building is one that we are told right now is very much at least questionable. In fact, we're hearing that there has been some partial evacuations in that area because of instability reasons. There was a time earlier today they were saying, at least according to people who had claimed they'd gone in and looked at that building, it was structurally sound. Something has happened in the meantime where someone was incorrect, because now they are concerned about that building. There is another one as well that they are worried about. But the work at trying to get survivors is the primary function here, and that is continuing at this time. One of the things we have noted is that there has not been a significant flow of equipment and trucks, mainly down the West Side Highway here, which is one of the main arteries that feeds into the site of where the Twin Towers collapsed. That may be an indication, but also, too, there are literally thousands of people that have been working. It may be that the site is up to capacity. One thing they are also concerned about, weather. We've talked about it before. It's expected to change abruptly after midnight tonight. They've enjoyed good weather for the searches that they have had to do, but it will begin to rain, could rain quite heavily, and the winds are expected to pick up. That is not good news at all, not good for the search effort, not good for all the equipment that is out in the open and that they are now trying to find some sort of shelter for. And then there is the good news, the recovery of 5 firefighters that apparently, we are told, had been entombed inside of their vehicle, which in this case was a Chevy Suburban. For 2 days they were trapped inside there until it was dug out this afternoon. And when the rescuers opened the doors, police tell us that 3 of those firefighters were able to make it out on their own. the chant that went up from the rescuers, USA, USA. It is one brief, bright moment in what otherwise has been a very gloomy picture for those working here